Thank you, Barry. Nice group of older young people here, not high school kids, but still young at heart, I think. I met several in a composition class yesterday who are aspiring writers of young adult fiction too. I really believe in young adult because of the way it shapes our images of God and of the world. Well, I fell in love with King Arthur and the matter of Britain, that whole cycle of stories and legends that has grown up around him, in high school when we read Idylls of the King. Anybody here read Idylls of the King? Do they still teach that? Just a few. Oh, fabulous. The language of Tennyson, the mystery of a baby whisked away to be later revealed as the rightful ruler, the promise of his return in Britain's greatest hour of need, all those things tugged at my imagination and made me desire more than anything that it be true. Sometime early in college, I discovered Mary Stewart's book, The Crystal Cave. Again, it was the language that drew me in to a mystical past when giving Britain a dynamic leader against the powers of darkness was Merlin's all-consuming goal. The music of Lerner and Lowe's Camelot kind of pulled me in too. And I mean the Richard Burton, Julie Andrews version, not the movie version. We will be celebrating our wedding anniversary in May, and my husband is taking me to see the stage show, so I'm excited. I grew up in a Christian home. Even as a small child, I wanted nothing more than to be a missionary. The exception to that was the first day of first grade, when I came away convinced that to be a school cook was an even higher calling. To this day, I have great respect for cool school cooks and the people in our dining hall. They set such a mood of how we're going to view studying. Good profession. We often had missionaries in our home when I was growing up, and I loved to listen to their tales of life in exotic countries, where they were doing the most important thing you could possibly do, which was share the good news of Jesus Christ. In King Arthur, as Barry has said, I saw a type of Christ, a king worth serving with all my heart. Now, the Crystal Cave is from Merlin's point of view, and it ends with the birth of Arthur. The baby is whisked away through a postern gate from Tintagel Castle on the cliffs of Cornwall, and I visited Tintagel there, and it's fabulous. He's hidden, lest he be torn apart by his father's enemies. A page named Ralph, in the service of Arthur's mother, Queen Egerne, is sent with him to protect him. Away from court, away from what seemed to be the significant events of the kingdom. We next meet Ralph in the second book of Mary Stewart's series, The Hollow Hills. He's chasing after a rambunctious 9-year-old who loves nothing better than to escape his tutors and go racing through the countryside on his stallion. The child has no idea that he is the son of the dead king and rightful ruler of all Britain. Ralph has spent the last 9 years babysitting at the back of Beyond. No one but Merlin has any idea the significance of what he's doing. His service has at times been very frustrating. For me as a young adult, wanting to be at the very heart of what God is doing in the world, that secular novel was a wake-up call. What if God asked me to babysit? What if he chose me to do something obscure that no one else recognized as important? Would I do it faithfully like a knight of the round table? Was I really willing to submit to this glorious king to whom I had sworn my allegiance? Even if he asked me to serve in the background where no one noticed? Even if it were boring or as frustrating as chasing an unruly 9-year-old? Before God could use me as a missionary in another culture, I needed to be willing to stay in boring old suburbia, if that was what my king asked me to do. Now, once I got past that need to submit, my life has been anything but boring. As Barry said, we've lived in many countries around the world. One of those was in a communist revolution. Another one was in a civil war. So as I said, it's been anything but boring. I'm a librarian by training, and I set up theological libraries in Brazil and in Mozambique, both of those places. And believe me, talk about obscure, unnoticed, unappreciated. It takes a lot more to run a library than just stamping the date due in the back of the book. So respect your librarians, please. I've consulted for libraries elsewhere in Africa and in Eastern Europe during the time of the fall of the Iron Curtain. Had a really exciting opportunity there in a national library to speak with communist librarians about how to classify religious literature in their newly open countries. And of course, you can't explain the Dewey Decimal System and why there's so much space given to Jesus Christ without talking about who Jesus Christ is. But eventually I moved from cataloging books to writing books. And whether I am cataloging books for a mission study center in Croatia, or using the internet to coach an African author and help her polish her work for publication, I'm doing it to serve my king. A king who has far more power and authority, glory and majesty than any medieval monarch, even King Arthur himself. And the best part, my king is real. His kingdom won't fall like a mythical Camelot. It lasts forever. Serving him is the most incredible way I could spend my life. As a fiction writer, as Barry has said, I want to tell a good story. I want to tell one that will stick in the minds of readers. I want to tell a story that will make them see God in a new way. One thread of the Arthurian stories that I loved so much was the story of the Holy Grail. And I'm sure you've heard it in many different versions, whether it's Monty Python or Dan Brown. There are lots of variations, modern variations as well as ancient. I picked up that thread in my Glastonbury Grail series of books. And I'd like to read a bit. Glastonbury Tor is the first book. Glastonbury is a real place in Somerset, England. Tor is a Celtic word for hill. And this hill outside of Glastonbury was believed by the ancients to be the entrance to the underworld. My main character, Colin, has fled his abusive father in Wales after trying to kill him, and he flees to Glastonbury Abbey, hoping to find forgiveness and healing for his soul and his hate. In the Abbey treasury, he finds an ancient olive wood drinking bowl. The wood is smooth as silk, and next to its simplicity, the gilt and jeweled reliquaries of the treasury seem no more than whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. The cup passes to the care of Father Dunstan, an elderly prior that Colin admires. This is the time when King Henry VIII is closing down the monasteries, raiding their treasuries for wealth, and ultimately closing them. Father Dunstan's monastery has already been closed. He's been tortured to reveal where the treasure is hidden. Of course, Henry has already taken all the treasure. There's nothing to reveal. He's now retired in Glastonbury. Father Dunstan talked of moving to the Dorter someday soon. But in the cold and damp of lingering winter, he took a chill. The fever was not high, but his body was old. "I do not think he will last the night," Brother Urban whispered on the third day. I set down the cup of broth, I as Colin, of course. I set down the cup of broth I had been trying in vain to spoon into Father Dunstan's mouth. Brother Urban picked it up to carry away. "I shall send for someone to hear his last confession." "I'll go," Roger said. His voice was low and heavy. It was Abbot Whiting who came. I knelt and kissed his ring when he entered the little cell. "Father," I began, but my voice caught in my throat. He laid a hand on my head in blessing. "This is no time for sorrow, Colin. It is a time of rejoicing when one of God's holy servants enters his presence at last. Wait outside while I hear his confession, but don't go far. I have need of you. Father Bede is bringing the elements." I glanced back as I left the tiny room. For all his talk of rejoicing, Father Abbot looked as sorrowful as I. I think Father Bede expected the abbot to ask him to assist, but instead it was me he wanted. Roger, Brother Urban, and a few of the other monks who had valued the old prior crowded into the tiny cell with us. "I have brought the chalice of St. Dunstan," Father Bede said importantly. "I thought it would be appropriate for one named after the saint." The abbot shook his head. "Father Dunstan has requested that we use this olive wood cup." He lifted the drinking bowl in his hand. "But is it consecrated?" Father Bede demanded. "It is. Father Dunstan has been using it in his personal mass for some time now. Colin, we will begin." I had often assisted our parish priests at Mass. I knew where to hold the prayer book and when to hand the abbot the holy water. I knelt and crossed myself at all the appropriate times. Father Dunstan lay pale against the cushions. The thin white hair around his tonsure spread on the bed linen like fragile silks of a spider's web. Father Abbot said the prayers over the cup. The olive wood drinking bowl reflected the glow of the candles that lit the tiny altar where it rested. Father Dunstan must have rubbed it with some of Brother Arthur's polish, I thought. But the glow seemed to grow until it outshone the candles on either side. I could not tear my eyes from its beauty, and yet the abbot continued his prayers in a heavy voice. He lifted the cup, and it was as if a blaze of light filled the room. The whitewashed walls gleamed like noonday sun on snow. The gold thread of the abbot's coat blazed like flames. The light reached into my very soul and exposed every secret thought and desire. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Domini non sum dignus." Lord, I am not worthy. The abbot turned and offered the cup to the man in the bed. I caught the scent of cinnamon and cloves and fragrant wine far richer than any our cellars held. Far-off voices chanted faintly, "Holy, holy, holy." I knew not the tongue, but I knew without doubt the meaning of the words. Father Dunstan's face glowed with the same unearthly light as the cup. His skin was firm and pink, and a ring of golden curls encircled his head. I was looking into the face of a young man, a few years older than myself. Perhaps I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. I knew him to be the Father Dunstan of the days of the Yorkish King Edward, when the priest had first made his vows to our Lord. His eyes danced with joy, and he reached eager hands to grasp the offered cup. "Drink ye all of it," Abbot Whiting recited. Father Dunstan gulped the wine, tears like liquid crystal running down his cheeks. It was as though he could not get enough of what that cup contained, yet could not believe his good fortune to have tasted even a drop of it. He laughed, the irrepressible joy of an infant spilling over in delight at communion with his God. I laughed with him, the sound coming out almost as a sob. How could anyone in that room refrain from laughing and crying and shouting for joy at the goodness of God? Yet Abbot Whiting continued the prayers without pause. He lowered the cup and the light waned. The distant voices faded, and I smelled again the herbs of the potions Brother Urban used against the fever. The walls glowed no more than newly washed wool, and then dimmed to their usual shadows. The cup faded to a polished gleam, and then with only the light of 2 candles in the room, even that was gone. Nothing remained but the yellow grain of olive wood, very old and very worn. Father Dunstan recovers miraculously. No one but Colin saw these things, but they saw his reaction and they know something is up. And when Father Dunstan is so much better the next morning, they're sure something's up. Colin goes to visit Father Dunstan. "You saw him, didn't you?" Father Dunstan demanded when I visited his cell that afternoon. Brother Urban had given me a curious look when I passed through the infirmary hall, and I saw the lay brothers whispering together with glances in my direction. But no one broke the abbot's order not to question me. "I saw you," I began. Not me. The Lord Christ. He came to me and offered his blood from his own cup. I saw the marks, the wounds he took for my sake. Oh, poor scarred hands, the marks of his love." He clasped his own hands to his breast as though feeling the pain. Abbot Whiting saw nothing, nor did Brother Urban. I think perhaps you, Colin, saw the glory. I saw the cup glowing with light, and I saw your joy. Oh, Colin, the joy of knowing my Savior waits for me, that he gave himself for me and has prepared a place to receive me forever into his presence. I feel new, like I could live forever. And yet I long to leave this body and live with him. He shook his head with a look of impatience. "'Tis for the abbot that God leaves me yet a while. He carries a heavy load. I can do little to bear him up, save in my prayers. He must choose which king he serves." He studied the wooden cup in his lap. "Colin," I tore my eyes from the cup and looked at his face. "When I am gone, take this to the abbot." "But Father," I protested, "you aren't going to die. You have recovered from the fever. You're quite well. Brother Urban says it's a miracle." "I know what they're saying, Colin." He shook his head and caressed the smooth side of the cup. "Miracles. How little we know their purpose." The cup shows the presence of God several times in the book of Glastonbury Tor, and at the end of the book, Colin returns home to be reconciled with his father. In Honthi Vale, he finds that is not so easy to do. And in Honthi Vale, God is silent. The cup just sits there. Colin begins to question if the glorious promises of God's presence were real, or were they just a dream? We've got just a few minutes to read a scene from after that first miserable day at home with his father. "I sat a long time by the fire that evening, staring into the flames and plucking the strings of the lute I had left behind when I fled to Glastonbury. I had written a letter to Alice, letting her know of my safe arrival. Tomorrow I would look for a peddler returning to Somerset for the winter who would be willing to carry it for me. Sir Stephen," his father, slouched in his chair, snoring, an empty ale cup fallen to the floor at his side. A twisted knob on one log near the center of the fire glowed strangely in the shape of a small bowl. It reminded me of the brightness of the olive wood cup in the cavern beneath the Tor, and indeed the glowing log seemed the exact shape and size. I must have fallen asleep myself, staring into the flames, for voices called. Not the whispered chant of "Holy, holy, holy" I had heard before when the cup had exploded with light. These were excited voices, anxious voices. "Fire," they cried, "bring water." Behind the cup, I thought I saw the burning beams of a house, the embroidered hangings of a bed, a corner of blazing tapestry, bright with golden threads, before it shriveled in the flames and fell away into blackness. The blazing cup shone brighter until its glory filled the room with a light too great to look upon. I squeezed my eyes shut and bowed my head. My Lord and my God. A cool breeze kissed my cheek. When I opened my eyes, I thought the form of a man stood in the flames. He held the cup in both his hands as if offering it to me. Words formed in my mind. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink? I stared at the scars on his hands and drew back. I cannot, I whispered. It's too hard. The log in the fireplace split and collapsed on itself. The man and the cup disappeared as sparks exploded into the room. I jerked from my reverie and stamped my boots on bits of red orange that glowed among the rushes of the floor. If Bridget had not replaced the old dry ones with fresh green for my homecoming, my fiery dream might have come true. When I was sure no flame would catch, I turned back to the hearth. Only a heap of glowing coals remained. My father did not stir when I went to my room and took the cup from the niche over the bed. No spark tingled my fingers. No light shone from the olive wood. Only the dull reflection of my candle. I cradled the cup in my hands, searching for the comfort I had once felt from it. But it was only a piece of wood, light with age, in need of polish, empty, as I was empty.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.